Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service, and we're in the midst of the long Labor Day weekend on this Sunday, September 5th, 2021. And as always, if you'd like additional weather information and you have access, you can find it at weather.gov/Alaska. Well, we have a number of things to talk about again this evening. We continue to have a volcanic ash advisory for the volcano Sepachenoi, which is located west of Adak in the Aleutian chain, and it continues to have minor eruptions, creating a plume of ash that now extends upwards to 10,000 feet, drifting northwest to southeast. That's mainly for aviation interests there near and west of Adak. I'll have more details in just a moment. We're going to see some steadier rains tomorrow into Tuesday in the northwest associated with a cold front, and then another push of milder air. 1 to 2 inches of rainfall could occur in the Kobuk and Noatak valleys, and the river levels and creeks there are going to remain elevated through the upcoming week. Also in the Panhandle, there was some steadier rains there the other day. It's going to be a little drier, not completely dry, but at least any showers that remain will be more scattered and a little lighter here as we go through Labor Day afternoon and evening, but more steadier rains will arrive later Monday night and into Tuesday. And overall, it's looking like perhaps a more progressive early fall pattern could set up here as we head toward mid-September. Start to see the more frequent low pressure systems, and they're also going to become a little stronger, bringing a little more wind and some areas of precipitation as we head toward mid-month. But here is that volcanic ash advisory, or SIGMET as we call it, because of aviation interests. Very hazardous. Volcanic ash is very hazardous to aircraft operations. And the plume extends surface to a flight level of 10,000 feet with winds northwest to southeast. And winds may turn a little more west to east here as we head into tomorrow. So if this activity continues, definitely stay tuned if you're out there toward Adak and having any type of flight plans. The advisory is in effect at least into this Sunday evening, but could be extended if the activity persists. And then as far as precipitation forecast across the state, most notable areas are going to be Monday from just east of Kotzebue on over toward Bettles. As I mentioned, the areas there, the Kobuk Valley, could be picking up another inch or two of rain Monday into Tuesday. And then down in the southeast, there's going to be another area of low pressure lift out of the northern Pacific up along into the eastern Gulf and bring portions, especially the central and southern panhandle, perhaps another inch or so of rain. But here's the satellite imagery this afternoon, and overall rather extensive cloud cover across much of the state. There are a few breaks here or there, but not much, certainly no appreciable clearing. And we continue to see mainly some lingering scattered light showers, though along the cold front that's worked its way into the northwest, it continues to press inland and weakening. There is a band of rain along that, and then trailing back across the North Bering into eastern Russia, we have an area of low pressure that's going to kind of persist. And eventually, southwesterly winds surface and aloft are going to pull in some milder air across the southwest. And the brief cool down we anticipate, for tomorrow there across the northern half of the state, it'll be short-lived because some of that milder air will try to turn northward and cause the coldest air to retreat back up into the Beaufort and Chukchi seas. So looking at the surface map today, lingering low pressure near the Kenai trough of what is left of the low pressure that lifted up into the Panhandle. There's even been potential for an isolated rumble of thunder there in the Panhandle this afternoon, and there have also been some other areas of potential for isolated rumble of thunder there along the Alcan border, east, central, southeast areas of the state. You can see the cold front working its way eastward. It'll continue to wash out overnight. And as temperatures cool, the higher elevations in the Brooks Range will pick up some light snow, and areas along the Arctic coast and also the south side of the Brooks Range could see a little mix of precipitation, but predominantly rain in the lower elevations. And then back to the west there, you see that low pressure just off of the Russian coast. And there's going to be a few different low pressure systems kind of consolidate there and try to see a little push of milder air come back into the southwest part of the state by Monday afternoon, coming in off of the Bering, but it will be a moist flow, so as a result there'll still be some areas of rain or scattered showers. And then if you look down there, the lower right of your map, there's that low pressure that'll be lifting northward and affecting the Panhandle on Tuesday with some additional rainfall. And back to the northwest, the coldest air just stays back across eastern Russia with southwesterly flow across the state. A weak ridge of high pressure nudging up into south central areas, the Kenai on up toward the eastern third of the state. So that'll allow a little reprieve, a little better weather here Tuesday, especially Wednesday and maybe into Thursday, before a couple of low pressure systems, that energy south of the Aleutian chain may eventually form a better low out over the Gulf as we head into Thursday and Friday of next week. So here are the low temperatures for Monday morning, generally around or just above 50 across the Panhandle, upper 40s, low 50s across south central coastal areas, and upper 30s toward McGrath, or the west side of the Alaska Range. Monday afternoon should get readings back up around 60 in the Panhandle, as well as across much of south central areas, including Talkeetna, down toward Anchorage, as well as down toward Homer and Kodiak. And then for Tuesday morning, look for lows upper 40s to around 50 there in the Panhandle, and mid-upper 40s across much of the south central areas. With a few more breaks Tuesday afternoon, we could get temperatures back up into the lower 60s across portions of the south central, and generally near 60 with some additional rainfall across the Panhandle on Tuesday. The Arctic coast will see lows down around the freezing mark, as will a little below freezing up through the Brooks Range, where there could be some light accumulations of snow, and temperatures generally in the 30s for lows across much of the north. High temperatures Monday afternoon confined to the lower mid-40s across the Brooks Range North Slope into the Seward Peninsula, though along and south of the Yukon River could see readings back up into the 50s, not as warm as it has been. And then Tuesday morning, look for lows generally in the 30s across the far north, and 40 plus along and south of the Yukon River, with high temperatures again generally in the 40s across the north and Seward Peninsula, and generally in the 50s, though some 60-degree readings could occur Yukon Flats on over toward Eagle and Northway. Across the southwest for Monday morning, the interior will see lows generally in the lower 40s, upper 40s as we extend out across the Alaska Peninsula into the Aleutian Chain. High temperatures Monday afternoon, still under some cloud cover and some lighter showers, confined to the lower mid-50s, 48 though only there at Nome. And then heading down the length of the Aleutian, highs should generally be in the upper 50s or so, from King Salmon all the way down to Cold Bay. And then for Tuesday morning, look for lows across much of the region in the interior of the southwest, only in the mid-upper 40s, and generally upper 40s to around 50 degrees across the tip of the Alaska Peninsula into the Aleutians, with high temperatures generally in the 50s across much of the region on Tuesday afternoon. And a quick check of the temperature outlook for September 11th into the 15th, leading us into the mid-month. As this fall pattern, more progressive pattern emerges, it looks like we could see some cooler temperatures setting up over the southwest into south central areas, and precipitation very well could average above normal all the way from the southwest YK deltas on up the Alaska Range into near Fairbanks as we progress toward a little cooler and more typical wetter fall pattern here as we head into the middle of September.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving along to your aviation weather, if you are planning a flight Monday into Tuesday, we'll see IFR conditions to start out Monday morning across the Panhandle on up along the northern Gulf Coast to Prince William Sound. Areas also along the Brooks Range to the Arctic coast, and the central North Slope areas of the Alaska Range and into the west. By Monday afternoon, conditions will have improved across much of the interior, though still IFR conditions lingering there in the northern Panhandle and toward Yakutat. Also off to the west coast there, particularly around St. Lawrence and out over the central Bering. And then for Tuesday morning, we'll see IFR conditions, especially along and south of the Brooks Range, and also extending through a good portion of the southwest and west central areas, including St. Lawrence. And then finally, Tuesday afternoon, we'll see MVFR conditions across much of the interior, with the exception of there in the east central areas along the Alcan border. And past conditions on Monday, look for IFR conditions becoming MVFR at Anatuvik. That will also be the case at Adigan. And then further south and west, Lake Clark and Merrill will see MVFR conditions become VFR. And that'll be the case at Rainy as we begin around the Alaska Range, MVFR to VFR conditions on Monday. Windy Pass starting out with some IFR conditions, becoming a VFR as we go into the afternoon. And Isabel will also see IFR conditions in the early morning, giving way to MVFR. Mentasta should generally hold on to MVFR conditions throughout the day on Monday. And Tonita will start out IFR, especially through the east entrance, improving to MVFR with better conditions the further west you fly there from the west entrance. And that'll be the similar case there for Portage, IFR conditions, east entrance, especially out over Prince William Sound, improving to MVFR by afternoon with better conditions the further west you fly of the west entrance. And Chilkoot and White will hold on to IFR conditions throughout the day on Monday. Overall freezing levels are lowest in the northwest. They're down to the surface there, and gradually rise 2 to 4, even 6,000 feet as we get out toward eastern areas and south central areas. And the Panhandle generally above 6 to near 8,000 feet, and you'll see freezing levels above 8,000 to 9,000 feet as you get out through the eastern and central Aleutians. Icing potential will be greatest around the Bering Strait, including St. Lawrence and the Seward Peninsula, between 6 and 12,000 feet, and also an area of considerable moderate icing associated with low pressure that will be lifting northward out of the North Pacific up into the eastern Gulf southwest of Haida Gwaii. And a look at strongest upper level winds at jet stream level. 30,000 foot winds are in excess of 100 knots, upwards to 115 knots coming onshore southwesterly there across Haida Gwaii into British Columbia. And then another area of strong upper level winds southwest of the Aleutian chain, upwards to 120 knots from the northwest, and overall fairly broad upper level winds from the west and northwest across the interior between 60 and 80 knots. Coming down to 9,000 feet, we'll see winds there in British Columbia from the southwest upwards to 55 knots in the vicinity of Haida Gwaii and into British Columbia, and then back out across much of the western portion of the state, winds between 35 and 45 knots from the west. And as we drop down to 3,000 feet, low pressure circulation there coming out of the North Pacific up into the southeast Gulf with winds upwards of 45 to 55 knots just southwest of Haida Gwaii. And then across west parts of the state, look for westerly winds upwards of 35 knots associated out ahead of that low pressure there in eastern Russia, and a broad area of southwesterly winds around 35 knots out over the Bering. And this will translate to the potential for some considerable moderate turbulence in much of the west, including the lower and middle Yukon Valley and Norton Sound, as well as the Seward Peninsula between surface and 4,000 feet. And then associated with that area of low pressure lifting out of the North Pacific into the southeast Gulf, that's going to enhance the potential for some turbulence in the vicinity of Haida Gwaii between the surface and 5,000 feet during the day on Monday. So that does it as far as your aviation outlook here as we head through the early part of the week. We are going to see an increasing number of low pressure systems, and they're going to become a little stronger here as we head through later next week into the upcoming weekend and into the following week as we slide a little deeper into the month of September. Have a safe flight if you're heading out.
Technology. It's the rhythm of our everyday life. We're more dependent on satellite and communication systems than at any other time in history. Disruptions can affect our economy and even our safety. To prepare for the effects of such events and minimize impacts, we need to look outside our atmosphere, some 93 million miles away, at a star we call the Sun. It's our main energy source. It warms the earth and grows our food. While the sun and the space between may seem pleasant from our perspective, it's anything but peaceful. At its surface exists a chaotic state of eruptions and radiation. And unlike Vegas, what happens at the sun doesn't stay at the sun.
Space weather is essentially emissions from the sun, radiation, magnetic field that erupts from the solar surface, pumped out into space, sometimes right towards Earth. When it impacts the Earth, it impacts our technology. That's what we call space weather.
These solar events and their effects at Earth can disrupt systems we take for granted. From causing blackouts to the power grid, to delaying offshore drilling operations due to inaccurate GPS data. Interference with communication systems can force air traffic to reroute and impact rescue response and coordination. Outside our atmosphere, solar radiation can harm astronauts and the systems they depend on. The good news is that these eruptions can be detected early. Forecasters at the NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center in Boulder, Colorado, have their eyes on the sun at all times.
The Space Weather Prediction Center is part of the National Weather Service and is very much like a normal weather forecast office. We're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're looking at data, we're looking at imagery, we're looking at model outputs. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches of imminent activity to our customers so they can take action.
In many ways, forecasting space weather is a lot like forecasting hurricanes. Those who rely on space weather forecasts, like electric power grid managers, are informed early on and can begin taking protective action.
When we see an eruption on the sun, space weather forecasters will issue a watch. This is much like a hurricane watch. When a hurricane sits offshore of Miami, for example, perhaps 48 hours out, we too can see way in advance that something may be coming towards the Earth.
As the storm moves toward us, it hits a monitoring spacecraft orbiting 1 million miles away from Earth.
It's kind of our buoy sitting out there offshore, and that hurricane about 30, 45 minutes before it makes landfall, we'll get the measurements from the buoy. That's what this spacecraft does for us. That big eruption that left the sun hits the spacecraft. Now we've got the measurements of exactly what's going to impact us here on Earth, and we issue the warnings to give the power grid a heads up that the storm is now imminent. An interesting element to this whole process is that when the forecasters issue the alert, the power grid receives the alert, takes the necessary actions to protect the grid, and the average citizen never knows anything ever happened.
The number of customers who rely on space weather information continues to grow. As our reliance on technology increases, so will our need for constant monitoring of the sun.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
GPS has changed society. Most people don't realize how remarkable and how many different applications there are.
The GPS has become an integral part, not just of our daily lives as far as cell phones and guidance for our cars and mapping, but the whole system in agriculture is really relying heavily on high accuracy GPS.
So they're using GPS to plant those seeds with centimeter accuracy. And then they can come behind it and irrigate and fertilize right where that seed is with that 1 centimeter accuracy.
The GPS creates a line for the operator that he can steer along, or you go to another level and the operator doesn't steer anymore and the tractor has an automatic steering system on it, much like a cruise control on a car, except for when I push the button it doesn't drive a set speed. When I push a button it stays on a predefined line.
You don't even need lights. You can do it at nighttime. You program your GPS and it's driving that tractor for you. So it's huge, and it's changing the way that the farmers farm the fields.
6 or 7 days out.
There's an interest in GPS applications from the space weather side because when the sun is eruptive, it causes GPS to falter, and in some cases it doesn't work at all.
Productivity may suffer to a certain degree in that there's no way that I as a human being can steer as good 8 hours a day as a GPS system's going to do. It's going to be the same all day long. Some of the other application technologies, those are going to be gone. We're not going to have the ability to do good section control on sprayers and planters and fertilizer applicators without GPS.
We see a huge growing customer base in so many different industries, so many different sectors now relying on GPS and high precision GPS. They're all big customers for us.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Well, in our marine weather today, we start out with the sea ice edge, and we're almost near that maximum northern retreat that we expect late in the season. And before long, in another week or two, it'll begin to rebuild and spread southward. But for now, a lot of open water there along the Arctic and northwest coast. Here's a quick check, something I want to share from our sea ice desk. It's the concentration of sea ice, and this is the comparison. The lower left is this year, 2021, going back to 2016. And the areas of red and orange show the greatest extent of concentration of sea ice. This is mainly multi-year ice. And this year, 2021, we have more in the way of lingering ice than we've had in the past several seasons. So that's an interesting note. But as I said, we will eventually see the sea ice begin to expand southward here as we get into some colder temperatures. But in the meantime, here in the southeast, the Panhandle for Monday's marine forecast, inner waterways, south-southeast winds 10 to 15 knots, waves 2 to 3 feet. Along the outer coast there of the Gulf, winds generally 10 to 15 knots, waves 4 to 6 feet. And as low pressure lifts up out of the North Pacific into the eastern Gulf, we're going to see winds southeast to even easterly, northeasterly component as the low approaches, with winds increasing 25 upwards to 35 knot gales and waves building 13 to 14 feet. Inner waterways, winds will generally be out of the north at 15 knots, Skagway down toward Petersburg, and waves 3 feet, but mouth of Dixon entrance could see some 8-9 footers with 30 knot southeast winds. And then looking to south central areas on Monday, fairly quiet, winds generally around 10 knots there, the North Gulf into Prince William Sound, waves 2 feet in the Sound, 4 feet off the Kenai, and generally 2 to 3 feet in Cook Inlet, with the exception at the mouth of Cook Inlet. West winds to 20 knots could produce waves of 6 to 7 feet. And into Tuesday, winds will generally be fairly light across the region, variable at 10 knots throughout Cook Inlet, waves only a couple of feet, and westerly to 15 knots off of the Kenai with waves of 4 feet. Across the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island will see west-northwest winds 15 to 20 knots, waves 4 to 5 feet, and more southwesterly winds on the Bering side will keep waves of 3 to 4 feet. And then on Tuesday, overall, we'll see southwesterly winds around 15 knots across the region with waves of 3 to 5 feet on the North Pacific side and 3 to 4 feet from off of Bristol Bay down to Cold Bay. And then looking across the Aleutian chain, winds will generally be southwesterly at the surface at 15 to 20 knots, waves around 4 feet area wide, except for maybe 6 feet west of Kiska. And then on Tuesday, variable winds 10 to 15 knots across the eastern half of the Aleutians, with waves 7 to 8 feet on the North Pacific side, 4 to 6 feet on the Bering side, and turning more southwesterly west of Adak there at 15 to 20 knots and waves 7 feet. Across the west coast, winds will generally have a south or southwesterly component, 20 to 25 knots, waves running 4 to 6 feet. And then on Tuesday, look for south to southwest winds, again in the 20 to 25 knot range, and waves generally 5 to 7 feet. Along the Arctic coast on Monday, winds will be westerly 15 to 20 knots, Prudhoe Bay eastward. But then southwest winds along the northwest coast to 10 knots, and southeasterly winds out of Kotzebue Sound at 15 knots across the lower Chukchi Sea with waves of 5 to 6 feet. And on Tuesday, winds will generally have an easterly component along the Arctic coast of 20 to 25 knots, waves 4 to 5 feet. And look for more southerly winds there from St. Lawrence Island up through the Bering Strait into the lower Chukchi Sea, with waves around 3 feet in the lower Chukchi Sea, but could be a little higher there approaching the strait with south winds of 25 knots and waves of 6 feet. And a quick check of the surface weather map as we go into Monday. There will be low pressure lifting out of the North Pacific up heading toward the Panhandle, bringing additional rainfall, especially steadier rains, later Monday night into Tuesday, along with some stronger winds. As I indicated earlier, there could be some gale force gusts there along the southern half of the Panhandle Gulf Coast. And then back toward the west, we have low pressure out over eastern Russia and the Bering Strait, with southwesterly flow across much of the eastern Bering, impacting the southwest and west central coast. And then low pressure remains out there over eastern Russia with a couple of lows south of the Aleutian chain. So that does it for Sunday's weathercast, and I hope you have a great Labor Day tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.